Ravens came into this draft with only 49 players under contract, second lowest in the NFL as they try to rebuild this team, very hard hit by free agency. Now let's go to Andrea Kramer.
The Bucs had 2 picks in the 4th round. They got 3 to go. They filled their 2 remaining needs on the line and in the secondary, taking Jason Ogden, the tackle, and safety Eric Austin. Tony Dungy said we're past the have-to stage. Now they can take the proverbial highest-rated player on the board. He'd like to get a return man, though. Let's head to Mike Tirico.
It's taken us a long time in this draft to bring up that phrase, highest-rated player available, but that's what you're talking now. And again, the inexactness of this science really increases in its scope as you get towards the later picks. And we are now sitting on pick 140 in the 5th round of this draft. Quarterback selections. So far, we've had a couple to go. Mel, the guy on the top of your board is a difficult one to project for people, and Kyle Waho's out of Southern Cal. Explain why NFL teams are going to have a problem projecting him.
Well, I think when you split time with Brad Otten and you're a quarterback who certainly has the size and a great arm but doesn't throw that tight spiral, there's some concern. Certainly John Stark, after transferring from Florida State down in competition, he's going to have to prove he can still step it up. But I think what you're seeing with quarterbacks, remember Elvis Gerbach was an 8th-round pick in an 8th-round draft. Gus Frerotte, a 7th-round pick in a 7th-round draft. The reason quarterbacks get pushed down is because if you spend time developing these quarterbacks, which is what you're going to have to do, by the time they're in the league and they're ready to play in their 3rd or 4th year, you can lose these kids as free agents. That's what happened in Miami with Scott Mitchell. So if you're not going to go in the first 3 rounds, a lot of these quarterbacks, the run starts in round 6 and round 7.
I think you know a thing or two about teams that develop young quarterbacks and then have to watch them go play somewhere else.
2 quarterback gurus I played for, Lindy Infante and Mike Holmgren. And that's the one thing they talked about is being sure that if the starter goes down, our backup has got to be better than our starter. And I think, just like Mel said, you got to get these guys that are sliding down are going to be excellent picks for guys like Philadelphia and New York, guys that are going to come in and play in 2 or 3 years, and they're going to be special. The Green Bay Packers obviously need to start developing again backup quarterbacks after we've seen their quarterbacks move around the NFL, and one of them may end up starting in Philadelphia in Ty Detmer. But let's turn our attention back to the quarterbacks who are still out there and what happens to these quarterbacks and what is their psyche as they wait to get selected. Let's join our guy who is in our luxury box, Mark Malone. Good food provided for you up there today, Mark?
Well, we haven't quite gotten to that yet, but let's talk about those quarterbacks. I think it's tough, Mike, when you're a quarterback because these kids have been pampered, they've been coddled, they've been the focus of attention in their programs for so many years, and all of a sudden as they fall through the 2nd rounds, I think their feelings get hurt a little bit. But it really takes a lot in terms of trying to learn the game at the NFL level. These guys are better off going into situations for the most part where they can learn and understand all the different coverages, the complications of the NFL game, and ultimately find a place where they can start and play a little bit. And, you know, you and I discussed, too, Mike, why there aren't so many quarterbacks in the draft. Everybody looks back to '83 with Marino and Kelly and all the great players. You know, I talked to a general manager, and he mentioned to me, and I thought it was very interesting, the 2 hardest positions in sports to fill, quarterback and pitcher. Most of the kids coming out of high school who are great pitchers are also great quarterbacks. Well, if they're getting signed to minor league contracts in Major League Baseball as they try to fill their pitching needs, I'll tell you what, that leaves the quarterback pool dry for the NFL. And although I haven't heard that before, it's a very interesting concept, Mike.
It certainly is. And I was just going to check with Mel. You have a great quarterback potentially at LSU who's gone to a baseball career with the Florida Marlins in Josh Booty. He's a position player, correct?
He is. I'll tell you, you look at him, I mean, he's a great quarterback prospect. Of course, he signed with LSU, then he decided to sign that huge contract with that huge signing bonus with the Florida Marlins. He was a shortstop. They moved him to 3rd base. He struggled. Yeah, he's the kind of quarterback in next year's draft. He would be draft eligible as a 3rd-year player. You might want to at least get his rights because if there is a change of heart down the road, and I believe the Marlins will have him for a 6-year period, which will take him actually into the year after he would have graduated. But when he comes into your organization, he's still a young kid, and with the lack of quarterbacks out there being developed at the college level, a kid like Josh Booty in next year's draft might be interesting to talk about.
He hasn't been lighting it up from an average standpoint in his early days in the Marlins developmental baseball situation. So that's a name to keep in the back of your mind as you look towards next year's draft. And why people are looking so hard for quarterbacks is because they're not out there. We asked a lot of NFL key people, what's wrong with the quarterback crisis?
And we're still going to have the marquee names come into the league and be good players. You're not going to get 6 every year. You're not going to get Kerry Collins and Steve McNair every year. If you did, there wouldn't be the premium on the position.
Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of, quote, franchise quarterbacks who are coming out of college or have come out certainly in any great numbers in the last few years. I don't know if it's a correlation with the fact that college coaches, coaching staffs have a maximum number of assistant coaches, and so normally what would be a quarterback coach is also your offensive coordinator, and he spends a lot of time on game planning, certainly each week, and conducting practice for the offense, and takes away from the fundamental teaching of a young quarterback.
3 years ago, we felt we were in very good shape. We had Brett Favre, we had Ty Detmer, and Mark Brunell. Now we're back to Brett Favre.
And Jim McMahon is the backup quarterback in Green Bay. Here are the quarterbacks that have been selected in the NFL draft thus far. Tony Banks going in round 2. We've had 1 per round thus far. Hoying in round 3 to Philadelphia. Round 4, Jeff Lewis to Denver. But just when you look at those teams, just think who the established starters are. And you see the opportunity for success may very well lie for Lewis in Denver because there's someone in front of him that he can learn from for a while. Let's go to our ESPN studios and Chris Fowler. Chris?
Mike, thanks. Want to bring in 2 more mics on the issue of quarterbacks. First of all, Mike Lombardi, why haven't we seen more quarterbacks taken up here now, middle of round 5, and why will we see more taken in 6 and 7?
The last 2 years, 94, 95, there have been 11 quarterbacks on the final 53 roster that have made teams. So there's going to be 11 this year. That's been the trend in the National Football League. The reason they tend to go a little bit later is teams fill out their roster. They know they need to bring a 4th quarterback into camp. It's easier to get the guy you want instead of competing in the free agent market and trying to sign the guy at maybe higher dollars in terms of free agent money when you can draft him and feel relieved that you have the player.
So it's certainly a financial move. When we see players drafted in round 6 or 7, it doesn't necessarily mean that that team believes that guy can start. He's just a body in camp?
No, I don't think he's just a body in camp, but I think he's the guy that they wanted, and they rather not have to go out and compete with the other teams to try to get him. They've got him now. He's on their team. That's one less headache they have to worry about going into camp.
And the same thing goes for defensive linemen, which are expensive in the free agent market. Mike, let's talk about quarterbacks. We knew sitting here last year that this was going to be a very weak draft for quarterbacks, but there is a guy out there who's going to return to Tennessee for his junior season who's a great prospect.
Well, the best quarterback is Peyton Manning. There's no doubt about it. But hopefully he'll stay in college for a couple years, and we can watch him in college football, and he can try to win his national championship. But he has the whole package. First of all, he has size, and when you look at him here, he is just a very accurate passer. Now, here's play action. He's going to fake the ball, and good touch on the ball, good throw, and most of his throws are right on the money. Now, this is a play against Alabama. First play of the game. Watch, he's watching the free safety. On the break, the ball, they're trying to all go route on the free safety. Hit it right off the bat. Quickness. He has quickness. He can run the football. Here's another play action fake. Accuracy. He's got mobility also. He's going to sprint to the left here, but notice the feel he has for the defensive player coming to his back, and he's just able to get rid of the ball. Chris, I mean, he has it all. He's got everything you want in a quarterback.
All the things that are really lacking in the prospects this year. Put you on the spot, Mike Lombardi. Let's say you had a #1 pick. Mike said it yesterday, #1 overall in this draft. Are you willing to make that statement if he were a senior?
Well, if he were a senior, obviously he showed to the scouts right now that he can do everything you want to do in terms of a quarterback position. And certainly, as Mike indicated, he was a little hard on the quarterbacks in the NFL. There's not a lot of great quarterbacks in the league. Most teams are managing their quarterback, trying to win without him hurting him as much. And Peyton looks like to be the type of player you may not have to manage in a game.
But the other point, you're saying from an NFL standpoint, you would like to see him stay 2 more years, not come out after next year.
The hardest thing in the NFL we have to do is simulate quarterback reps. You know, you don't want your quarterback to get hurt, so you can't have contact. You can't collapse the pocket. You want the quarterback to throw the football. That's very difficult. So the more reps he can get at school, it's better for the NFL.
Unlike a lot of guys who might come out early, money not a factor. We know his dad, Archie, has plenty of money, and there are like 7 or 8 brothers and sisters he has to support. We'll have to see a year from now whether Peyton Manning is in the draft or whether he sticks around for his senior year. Mike?
Okay, Chris, so the quarterback situation is one that will develop, as Mike Lombardi said, a little bit later on in our coverage here that will take you to the end of round 7 on ESPN2. No quarterbacks taken in the last 6 picks, but a player of note, a name you may be familiar with, Marquette Smith, the running back out of Central Florida. But Mel, as Carolina adds Marquette Smith to his roster, I think most people think back to his days when he was a Florida State Seminole.
And big numbers situation at Florida State with work done and all those great young stable backs that they had. So he transferred down in competition to Central Florida. Of course, they have a great young quarterback there. We're talking young quarterbacks in Dante Culpepper, so keep an eye on that name down the road. He's only going to be a sophomore this year. But getting back to Smith, and you factor him into Carolina, they already drafted Tim Biakabatuka, who's going to be their franchise back, their featured guy. Then they also picked up in the 3rd round Winslow Oliver, kid from New Mexico. Great return man, almost a Dave Mega type, going to be a situational player. Marquette Smith's going to have a tough time in that Carolina Panther offense to be able to hone his skills and develop because of Oliver, who's basically the same kind of player, only with much better all-around package of skills.
So as different teams build up their offenses and Carolina does their offense, we talk Tampa Bay. The Buccaneers